When I was growing up as a child, I enjoyed watching cartoons. I watched a lot of cartoons every day after school. But you know which one was my favorite? It was a cartoon called Tom and Jerry. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Tom and Jerry, it's a series of, it's a cartoon that entails a series of comic fights between a house cat, Tom, and a mouse called Jerry. And each episode of Tom and Jerry is centered around Tom's numerous attempts to capture and kill Jerry and the mayhem and destruction that follows. Every time when Tom tries to capture Jerry, Jerry has to make an affirmative effort to get out, to escape a deadly situation, to save his life. And Jerry, he escaped most of the times, but there were some times when Jerry was just cornered. He had no way out, despite his efforts to escape Tom's grasp. He was cornered. And in those times, Jerry had to defend himself. He had to defend his life. Members of the jury, this right here is a Tom and Jerry case. The prosecution, the state wants to, they want to twist the facts to let you believe that Mr. Cole, my client, is the aggressor. But you're not that naive. You don't have to be an expert in criminal law or take a course in criminal law to see and understand that Mr. Cole acted in self-defense. I mean, this entire case could be summarized in 3 main points, right? Donald Abbott verbally threatened to kill Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole took affirmative steps to avoid every single confrontation with Donald Abbott. Donald Abbott eventually forced Mr. Cole into a corner. After chasing him multiple times, ultimately forcing Mr. Cole to make the difficult decision that we're talking about at trial today, which is shooting Donald Abbott. Members of the jury, if that isn't self-defense, I don't know what is. But let's dig deeper. The law states that self-defense is justified when 1, there is imminent danger of death or great bodily harm, and 2, the force must be necessary under the circumstances. Based on the testimony, based on the evidence, based on what we've covered in this trial, you have seen that self-defense is the appropriate way to characterize Mr. Cole's actions. Well, let's think about this. Mr. Cole wasn't threatened not once, not twice, but 3 times by Donald Abbott, right? Now, the first time when Donald Abbott saw Mr. Cole, he said, "I'm going to kill you." All right? While Mr. Cole was in his blazer, and Mr. Cole reacted by, speeding off, driving away, getting out of the situation, right? He made like Jerry and he ran away. He got out. Now the second time, after the first time, the second time, Donald engaged Mr. Cole on a reckless car chase on our public roads, right? Now during the second time, keep in mind that Mr. Cole was armed. He had his gun on him. He could have stopped during the chase, walk out of his car, and shot Donald right there. But he didn't. He took an affirmative step to escape a confrontation, dangerous confrontation. If somebody tells you that they want to kill you, I don't think any normal person would want to walk up to them and ask them why. Now the third time, Donald got a little bit clever, right? He found out that, realized that chasing, his tactics and strategies weren't working, the car chases weren't effective, so he decided to use his Toyota pickup truck and block the pathway leading directly to Mr. Cole's home. Now, Mr. Cole had no way out. With a trailer attached to the back of Mr. Cole's Blazer, it would have been very slow to reverse. It would have been difficult to maneuver the pickup truck on the gravel that was to his right and around the tree. And he couldn't go forward because Donald's pickup truck was blocking the driveway. So as Donald got out of his pickup truck and marched towards Mr. Cole's Blazer, he lunged towards him, forcing Mr. Cole to make that very difficult decision that night. We've heard from the witnesses. We've heard from our witnesses. Brenda Cole testified as to how scared she was that night, and as to the mental state of her husband, that he reasonably and actually believed that he was in danger. You've heard from Dr. Lamonaco, state's witness, who is neither a blood splatter expert nor a gunpowder expert in these matters, right? And pay attention to what she testified. She testified that Donald lunged towards Mr. Cole in a manner that is consistent with our story, and the trajectory of the bullet is also consistent with what our story entails. Heard from Virginia Abbott, state witness, who testified that Donald threatened to kill Mr. Cole on multiple occasions, and she testified to her efforts to minimize any probability of the two men having a confrontation. That ultimately, unfortunately, didn't work. Now, the state has the highest burden of proof. And that is a proof beyond a reasonable doubt. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Cole is guilty of first-degree murder. What do I mean by reasonable doubt? Well, think about this. You're going on vacation. You turn off the oven, stove, the TV, and as you're pulling out of the driveway, you decide to go back inside just to double check, right? Although you knew that you turned everything off in your house, you still had a tiny doubt that it was still left on, and you acted on that. Or if you think about going to a job interview, pack your resume, your writing sample, your transcript, and you leave. As you're on your way to the metro, double check your book bag to ensure that everything is still inside. Although you knew that everything is inside the bag, you still had a tiny doubt. You had a reasonable doubt that they just weren't there. So you members of the jury have been placed with the highest burden. The evidence, all the evidence must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Cole is guilty of first-degree murder. Based on the testimonies that you've seen, that you've heard, based on the evidence, and based on everything else that you've heard in this trial, it is only logical that you will return with a verdict of not guilty. Thank you.